Hi, I'm Carrie, and I'm here with Robert, who does the historical tours of Greater Holyoke. He does both public and private tours on the local canal systems, reservoirs, cemeteries, as well as various parks and streets in Holyoke, Chicopee, and South Hadley, Mass. You can find out more information about his tours on his website at holyokecanaltours.org. And you can also check out some of the videos he has and pictures, as well as his upcoming 2023 schedule. So today you're going to be talking about the St. Rose de Lima Church and Cemetery, right? So tell us about the history of the church.
This St. Rose de Lima Church is in the Aldermanville neighborhood of Chicopee, Massachusetts. It is a trolley church, and it's a trolley neighborhood. That means the neighborhood did not exist until the trolley started coming through it on Groton Street. And that was about the 1890s. And it built up around a trolley. So there was nothing here but farms, and then it built up. It seems incredible to believe. Now it's the trolley church then. Everything you see, it belonged to the trolley. Now, the history of the church itself was it started out as a mission church, and it belonged to the Nativity Church, which was on Chicopee Street, and it was started as a mission church in 1897. Mission church means not a full church, didn't have its own name, didn't have its own pastor. It had a small congregation called the parish. And from 1897, it grew and grew until in 1909, it became a church on its own, had its own name and pastor. So this dates from 1909. Well, if you look at it, you know that's not from 1909. That's a new church that you see there. That's because the original church was just a chapel look to it. It was a wooden structure. It was along the southern edge of the church that's there now. And the church that was there now was built in 1954. So when that wooden chapel was there, it was used from 1909 to 1927. And then the parish, or the parishioners, moved into one of the wings of the school when the school was built in 1927. And from 1927 to 1954, it was in the school. And then 1954, they built what's there now, so it's about 70 years old. It's a beautiful church, and since it's so new, it has a very strong look to it.
So tell us about the neighborhood.
Well, the neighborhood is a trolley neighborhood. And a lot of the neighborhood was built up through the late 1890s into the very early decade of the 1900s. And a lot grew up around it, including what do you need? You need schools, you need churches, you need stores, you need parks, and Alderville has it all. Who made this trolley neighborhood? A person named Charles Alden, and he built it up to the level that he could. There were carpenters that came in, and they would build up the neighborhood. One of the carpenters was Marcel Couteau, who had built at least 50 of the homes in this neighborhood itself. That's an incredible number. And it built up and up, and nowadays you would not call it that, but if you look closely at the neighborhood, you could probably guess any place that has one main street going through and a lot of side streets is probably going to be a trolley neighborhood.
So where were the schools, convent, and rectory?
All right, so for the St. Rose de Lima Church, when you build up, you're going to get all those things along the way. And where were they? Well, the best thing to do is use my website. I have a little map there. And if you go on a tour, you can look at all the things along the way. Well, the school itself was a small home on one of the side streets. The home is not there anymore, but it was there from about the early 19 teens to 1927 when the St. Joan d'Arc school was built, and that school is still there. It's built in a neo-Roman style, and it has a beautiful look to it. It has on front of it to its right a memorial to many of the veterans that died during World War I and World War II. And this school is still a functional school. Now, the convent and the rectory were two homes out in front of the area where the school is. Obviously, those two homes are gone, but the priest home was to, as you look in towards the front of the school, the priest rectory was to the left at the corner. And as you look towards the front of the school, the nuns' convent was to the right. Now, what happened along the way is that you had a new rectory built up along the way, and you had a new convent along the way. So you didn't need these old convents and rectories, and so they took them down. Where's the new rectory? If you look from the sidewalk directly into the church, the rectory is obviously to the left. And again, if you look towards the church, and there's a side street along the edge of this church, right at the edge of that next corner was where the convent was. And so this where the rectory and the convent were. Now the convent has changed over, no longer do the nuns teach in the school, and so that convent is now a social center and a center to help needy people. And so there's been great changes along the way. And of course, every parish, good parish, will have its own cemetery, and so.
Well, why don't you tell us about the cemetery?
Okay, the cemetery is towards the east. You have to walk down one of the side streets, and so use my maps. And I would say it's about 2/3 of a mile walk to the St. Rose de Lima Cemetery. Now, you're going to find this is a nice cemetery. It was started in 1910. The first burial was that year. I think a couple of people died, were buried that year. Some of the features are that many of the priests are buried there, but the first priest is the only pastor not buried in the priest circle. And so it's good to look around. There's also a baby section, and the baby section is towards the right-hand side when you pass through the gates. Also, many of the very old burials are back in that section. So you can look around a lot. Now, my favorite section, of course, is the priest circle, but I mentioned one of the pastors, the first one, is not buried there. And he's buried, if you look at the priest circle, the first priest circle, as you go through the gates, it's very obvious in front of you. To the left of that priest circle is a very large stone. And that stone has on it Joseph Fredette. He is the first pastor of the St. Rose de Lima Church. He served from 1908 to 1924. And now,
Now, tell us about the priest circles in the cemetery.
the priest circle, there's two of them. The one has the pastors that were at St. Rose de Lima Church are in the first priest circle as you go right through the gates. The other priest circle is about 100 yards towards the east or towards the right of this one. That other one has pastors that were around other churches around Western Massachusetts. And I've taken pictures of all those, maybe 15 pastors. But the one that's more important is the first priest circle that you meet. This priest circle has inside of it all the pastors that were in this beautiful church through the years. First one that's buried here, of course, was Joseph Fredette. He's right outside the ring. But then there was Joseph Brochu. There was Jean-Baptiste Lamoth. There was Charles Fortin. There was Armand Sylvan. There was Eugene Guerin. There was Roger Viau. He's outside the circle in the section behind it. There's Jean-Paul Richard. There's Leo Leclerc. And that leads us to pastors that still serve in the church. So as you walk around this priest circle, you see something incredible. All the stones are shaped the same. They're shaped in the form of a confessional chair. They all have the same look to it. Now, if you read the names carefully, you read something very incredible. every one of the pastors of St. Rose de Lima became a Monsignor. That is an honorary designation that only the bishop of the diocese can give to a pastor that both is a very learned person, a very academic person, that either has a doctorate in pastoral letters or a real PhD doctorate, or that has served at a high level to his parishioners. Most pastors of most churches never reach the Monsignor level. Every one of the barrels in this priest circle is at the Monsignor level. That's 8 pastors. That is an incredible record. And so that's why I think that people of Chicopee should go to the cemetery and go around that ring. Thank you for coming in, Storm.
Well, thank you for telling us a little about that. And again, you can check out more of his information on his website and his upcoming schedule at his HolyokeCanalTours.org. You can also email him directly at bobcat4214, capital B, at yahoo.com. And hopefully you can check out some of the other podcasts we have. Thank you.
Motion. And so we're talking about this beautiful church. It was started in 1897 as a mission church, and that means that it had its own building, but it was under the control of what was called the Nativity Church, which was in Chicopee in the Willimantic section. And in 1909, finally, it could be called a church. That means it got its own pastor on its own. And the chapel that was there in the beginning became a church. It was a wooden church, fairly small, but this was a small neighborhood. And so the church started at that very, very low scale level. Now, that is gone. So what has happened? Well, when you go on the Grand Street now, you now know that there's a big building there, and that was made in 1954. Now, along the way, the chapel had gone away, and what had come into place was that one of the wings of the St. Jean d'Arc School, or St. Joan of Arc School, became the location for the Sunday Masses. And so you had a chapel, and then a wing of a school, and then for 27 years they waited in that wing having their Sunday Masses. In 1954, they finally got enough money that they could build their own beautiful campus.
So tell us of the various locations of the schools.
Okay, now the school started out in the basement of that old wooden chapel because you didn't have any other place. And then what happened to it after that? Well, it moved into the second floor of that chapel. Not a big move at all either. And then it moved down Percy Street. There was a home there that they bought, and they put the school on the ground floor, and the convent for the nuns was on the top floor. But that's gone too. That home's not even there. And so that's 3 locations. And then finally, they were able to build the St. Joan of Arc School. In French language, it's called St. Jean d'Arc. And that was made in the year 1927. So they waited a long time to get that school going. Now, it's still there, it's still functional, it's still an open school. That means as of the year 2023, it's 96 years old. And that's wonderful. It's a beautiful school. It has a beautiful memorial out front to veterans that died during the course of wars that had been in Chicopee. Now, one thing to note is that sure I'll be talking about the convent, importantly, and the rectories, but also there's a cemetery associated with this church called the St. Rose de Lima Cemetery, made in 1910, and that one is in the back streets of this neighborhood too. So all conveniently, everything's right there. The convent was on that house down Percy Street, and that lasted for maybe 3 years. And the next convent there was actually, in front of the location where the school ended up being placed, there were 2 homes there. And those 2 homes were bought out by the St. Rose de Lima parishioners. The leftmost one became the campus, and that was the smaller of the homes. But the amount of nuns they needed kept growing and growing, and so they ended up taking over the right-hand one, which was actually the rectory. And so the pastors had to move out. And so that was the third location. And then finally, across Groton Street, but right at the same campus location, they built a permanent place for the nuns. And this building still exists. It was made in May of 1952, and they stayed there until the last nun served the school. The school's still functional, but it's served by laity teachers only. That means private teachers, not nuns. And so that convent is now changed into a pastoral center where they can have social functions, where they can have catechism classes, so forth. And so it's very heavily used still. And this campus has gone from very old features to very 1950 features very quickly.
Now tell us of the various locations of the rectory.
All right. Now, if you go on Percy Street again and you're walking down at the first house on the left, the present color is a bright blue. That was the rectory. And so the priest lived there in the very beginning. And the present owner actually knows that. I talked to him about that. Now, where did it move? It moved next into a house that was at the corner of the parking lot, front parking lot for the school. And the rightmost home, which was a bigger home, was used as a rectory. And this was from the years 1919 and 1927. And so it didn't move far at all, because the residential home right behind this was the first rectory from about 1900 to 1918. Then he moved into this house, and then finally they moved into the gorgeous one that was built in 1929 across the street and on the northern edge of the St. Rose de Lima church. And that one's still there. It's still being used by the pastor, and it's a beautiful 3-story building, and it makes a great look, having the rectory, the church, and the old convent right in a row with the school opposite. But very few people know that none of those are the originals. The originals are all gone.